r/AITA. My family called me cheap for 3 years, so I stopped helping them. The text message from my sister came in at 2:47 a.m. Emergency. Car died, need $800 for repairs ASAP or I'll lose my job. You're literally the only one who can help right now. I stared at my phone screen in the dark, that familiar knot forming in my stomach. 3 months ago, this would have had me scrambling to transfer money before sunrise. But tonight? Tonight I just turned my phone face down and went back to sleep. See, here's what Sarah doesn't know, I've been keeping a spreadsheet. Call it petty, call it obsessive, but for the past 3 years I've tracked every single dollar I've given my family. Car repairs, medical bills, groceries, rent assistance, holiday gifts I supposedly had to cover because you make good money in tech. The total sits at $47,832. $47,000 of my salary that I handed over without question, because that's what family does, right? But apparently, I'm the cheap one. God, you're so paranoid about money, Mom said last week when I suggested she compare prices before hiring the most expensive contractor in town for her bathroom renovation. Not everyone can live like a monk like you do. This, from the woman whose mortgage I've been secretly helping with for 8 months. You need to live a little, Dad chimed in, shaking his head at my 5-year-old Honda Civic. What's the point of making decent money if you're going to drive around in that thing and eat ramen every night? The ramen comment stung because it was partially true. I do budget aggressively. I meal prep, I drive an older car, I live in a modest apartment instead of the downtown loft my coworkers rent. But not because I'm cheap, because every month, a chunk of my carefully planned budget gets obliterated by my family's latest crisis. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago at my cousin's birthday party. Sarah was showing off her new designer purse to everyone, the same Sarah who texted me sob stories about not being able to afford her textbooks just 2 months earlier. Where did you get that? Aunt Linda asked, admiring the bag. Oh, I saved up forever for it, Sarah beamed. I'm finally learning to treat myself instead of being all cheap and paranoid about money like some people. She glanced meaningfully in my direction. The table erupted in knowing laughter. My own mother, the same woman I'd sent $600 to just the week before for her emergency dental work, actually giggled and said, well, we know who she's talking about. I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, listening to my family mock the person who'd been keeping them financially afloat. The person who'd worked overtime for months to afford their emergencies. The person who'd given up vacations, date nights, and basic life experiences to make sure they never heard the word no when they needed help. That night, I went home and opened a new savings account. I named it Freedom Fund. 3 weeks later, Sarah's transmission died, and for the first time in 3 years, her emergency became exactly what it should have been, her problem. My phone buzzed again. Another text, hello. This is literally an emergency. I know you're awake. Then another, come on, don't be like this. You know I'm good for it. I almost laughed. Good for it? In 3 years, my family had repaid exactly $200 of the money I'd lent them. But somehow I was the cheap one. I turned my phone to silent and pulled my blanket up higher. Let's see how cheap they think I am now. The next morning brought 17 missed calls and a string of increasingly frantic texts. Sarah had apparently enlisted the entire family as her personal army of guilt trippers. Mom, Sarah told me about her car. Why haven't you helped her yet? She could lose her job. Dad, call your sister back. This isn't the time to be stubborn. Even my Uncle Mike, who I maybe talk to twice a year, hey, heard Sarah's in a bind. Family helps family, you know. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. These same people had spent years rolling their eyes at my obsession with financial planning, but the moment their safety net disappeared, suddenly I was the villain for not jumping into action. I made my coffee, sat down with my laptop, and did something I'd never done before. I calculated what my life could have been. $47,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was a brand new car and a year of the kind of vacations I saw my coworkers posting on Instagram. That was security, experiences, a life where I didn't eat peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 nights a week while my sister bought designer purses with money she'd saved. My phone rang. Mom's contact photo filled the screen, that picture from last Christmas where she's wearing the expensive sweater I bought her after she mentioned feeling left out because she couldn't afford nice clothes. Hi, Mom. Finally. What is wrong with you? Sarah's been crying all morning. Her car is sitting in some parking lot and she can't even get to work today. That sounds really stressful for her. A pause. Well, are you going to help her or not? The old me would have already been pulling up my banking app. The old me would have apologized for not responding sooner and promised to transfer money immediately. I don't think I can help this time. What do you mean you can't help? You have money. You make good money. I have money because I budget carefully and save it. The same thing you guys call cheap and paranoid. Don't be ridiculous. This is completely different. This is an emergency. Like when Dad needed help with the mortgage. Or when you needed dental work. Or when Sarah needed textbook money that somehow turned into purse money. Another pause, longer this time. I don't know what's gotten into you, but this isn't like you. Sarah needs help, and you're her brother. Family takes care of family. You're right, Mom. Family should take care of family. Which is why I'm curious where everyone was when I was working 60-hour weeks to afford everyone else's emergencies. This is different. You chose to help us. Nobody forced you. The words hit like a slap. She was right, in the most technically accurate and emotionally devastating way possible. I had chosen to help. Every single time, I'd chosen their immediate needs over my own future. And apparently, that made my sacrifice meaningless. You're right. I did choose to help. And now I'm choosing not to. You're being selfish. This isn't about some petty grudge. I have to go, Mom. I'm sure Sarah will figure something out. She's resourceful. I hung up and immediately blocked all their numbers. My hands were shaking, whether from adrenaline or guilt, I couldn't tell. The silence that followed was deafening. For 3 years, my phone had been command central for family financial emergencies. Now it sat quiet on my desk, and for the first time in recent memory, someone else's crisis wasn't becoming my responsibility. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. By day 3, the family had found my work email. "Your sister is stranded," came the message from my father's rarely used Gmail account. "She missed 2 days of work already. Her boss is threatening to fire her. I hope you're happy." I stared at the email during my lunch break, parked in my beat-up Honda that had been the subject of so many jokes. The irony wasn't lost on me. This same car that embarrassed them so much was paid off, reliable, and hadn't needed a single emergency repair in 2 years. Meanwhile, Sarah was on her 3rd car emergency since January. My coworker Jake knocked on my window. "You okay, man? You look like someone died." "Just family stuff." "Ah." He nodded knowingly. "The kind that requires money or the kind that requires therapy?" "Both, apparently." That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I left work exactly at 5. No overtime to pad my savings for the next family crisis. No staying late to finish projects ahead of schedule. I drove home, ordered Thai food instead of eating another peanut butter sandwich, and settled in to watch Netflix. My doorbell rang at 7:30. Through the peephole, I saw Sarah standing on my doorstep, mascara streaked down her face, still wearing her work uniform from the restaurant where she'd apparently managed to get a ride after all. I opened the door. 3 days, she said, her voice raw. "You left me hanging for 3 days. How did you get here?" "Mom drove me. She's waiting in the car." Sarah pushed past me into my apartment. "We need to talk." I glanced outside and saw my mother's silhouette in the driver's seat, engine running. They'd planned this ambush carefully. "Nice place," Sarah said, looking around my modest living room with obvious disdain. "Very minimal. I see you're still committed to living like a college student. What do you want, Sarah?" She turned to face me, and for a moment, I saw something I hadn't expected, genuine desperation. "I need that money." "Not want, need. Do you understand what it's like to watch your life fall apart over $800? "Actually, yes. I've watched it happen to you 12 times in the past 3 years. That's not fair. What's not fair is that purse you bought with textbook money while I ate ramen to afford your actual textbooks." Her face flushed. "That was different. I found the books cheaper online. I saved money. And used my money to buy accessories. You're being petty. This is about so much more than a purse." She sat heavily on my couch. "I finally got my life together. This job, it's good. It's the first place that's ever treated me like I have potential. And I'm going to lose it because my piece of shit car decided to die and my brother suddenly decided to become an asshole." The guilt hit me like a physical weight. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of, that my decision would have real consequences for people I loved. "I can't keep being your emergency fund, Sarah. It's not sustainable." "Sustainable? God, listen to yourself. You sound like a financial advisor, not a brother. Maybe because I've had to become one to keep up with your emergencies." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she looked up, her expression had shifted from desperation to something harder. "Mom's right. You've changed. The old you would never let families suffer over pride. The old me was drowning. Poor you, with your stable job and your savings account. Must be so hard being the responsible one." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is your father. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Denny's on 5th Street. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." They weren't giving up. If anything, I just escalated this into a full family war. I showed up to Denny's 15 minutes early, partly out of habit and partly because I wanted to choose my own seat. The corner booth gave me a clear view of the parking lot and, more importantly, easy access to the exit if this went south. Dad walked in exactly at 2 p.m., scanning the restaurant until his eyes found mine. He looked older than I remembered, more tired. The guilt started creeping in before he even sat down. "You look good," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Rested. Thanks." The waitress came over and Dad ordered coffee. I stuck with water. Something about this meeting made me want to stay sharp. "Sarah got fired yesterday." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I forced my expression to stay neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" He leaned forward, studying my face. "Because you don't look sorry. You look like someone who's proving a point." "I'm not trying to prove anything." "Bullshit." His voice was quiet but sharp. "You want to know what I think? I think you've been keeping score this whole time, waiting for the perfect moment to make us all pay." The accusation stung because it was partially true. I had been keeping score, literally, in spreadsheet form. But not because I was planning some elaborate revenge. Because I was drowning and needed to see exactly how deep the water was. "You helped us because you wanted to," Dad continued. "Nobody put a gun to your head. And now you're acting like we owe you something. I don't want anything from you. I just want the helping to stop. Even if it means watching your sister lose everything." I thought about Sarah's face 3 nights ago, the genuine desperation I'd seen there. The way she'd said need instead of want, like she finally understood the difference. "She'll find another job." Will she? You know how long it took her to find this one. 6 months of applications and rejections. This place was different, they saw potential in her. Management training, benefits, a real career path. Dad's coffee arrived and he wrapped his hands around the mug like he was trying to warm himself. All gone now because her brother decided to teach her a lesson about fiscal responsibility. That's not. Isn't it? He took a sip of coffee, never breaking eye contact. You could have prevented this with one transfer from your phone. Instead, you chose to let her fail. The worst part was that he wasn't wrong. I had made a choice, the same way I'd chosen to help for 3 years. The difference was that this choice felt like self-preservation instead of self-sacrifice. Where was this concern when she was calling me cheap? When Mom was laughing about my paranoid budgeting? You all made it very clear how you felt about my financial choices. We were joking around. Family teases each other. For 3 years. Dad was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee. Maybe we took it too far sometimes. But you never said anything. How were we supposed to know it bothered you? Because I was the one bailing everyone out while living like a broke college student. You chose to live that way. You make good money, we all know that. We figured you were just. I don't know, naturally frugal. Naturally frugal. I almost laughed. Is that what you call working overtime every month to afford other people's emergencies? Something shifted in his expression. What do you mean, overtime? And there it was, the moment I realized my family had no idea what their help had actually cost me. They'd seen my willingness to assist as proof that I had money to spare, not evidence that I was sacrificing my own financial stability to provide theirs. Dad, where did you think the money was coming from? His answer would tell me everything I needed to know about whether this family war could ever end. Dad stared at me across the table, his coffee growing cold between his hands. I thought, you said you were doing well at work. Promotions, raises, that kind of thing. I am doing well. But doing well doesn't mean I have an endless pile of money sitting around waiting for emergencies. But you always said yes. Every time we asked, you came through. People don't do that unless they can afford it. The conversation was interrupted by my phone buzzing against the table. A text from an unknown number. This is Sarah. Borrowed mom's phone. Landlord served eviction notice today. 30 days. Hope you're satisfied. Dad saw me reading and held out his hand. Let me see. I hesitated, then slid the phone across. His face went pale as he read. Jesus Christ. She's going to be homeless. She'll figure something out. Maybe she can move back in with you and mom. We can't. He stopped himself, but the damage was done. You can't what? Dad ran his hand through his thinning hair. We're having our own problems right now. The mortgage situation is complicated. My blood went cold. What mortgage situation? The modification we applied for got denied. We're 3 months behind now. The bank is starting foreclosure proceedings. The words hit me like a freight train. 3 months behind. I'd been helping with their mortgage payments for 8 months, but apparently I'd only been covering part of it. They'd been falling behind anyway and never told me. How far behind are you, Dad? In total? About 8,000. He couldn't meet my eyes. Maybe $9,000. On top of everything else I'd already given them. The number was so absurd I actually laughed, which made Dad flinch. So let me get this straight. Sarah's about to be evicted, you and Mom are facing foreclosure, and I'm still somehow the villain in this story. Nobody's calling you a villain. Really? Because I've been called selfish, stubborn, petty, and an asshole in the past week alone. Dad's phone started ringing. He glanced at it and his face went even paler. It's your mother. Sarah's with her. He answered on the third ring. Hello. I could hear Mom's voice through the speaker, high-pitched and frantic, but couldn't make out the words. Slow down, Linda. What happened? More frantic talking. She what? How much? My stomach dropped. Sarah had done something stupid. Dad looked across the table at me with an expression I'd never seen before, pure panic. We'll be right there, he said, hanging up. What happened? Sarah went to one of those payday loan places. The ones with the crazy interest rates. She borrowed $1,500 against her next paycheck. I felt the blood drain from my face. Her next paycheck from the job she just lost. She didn't tell them she was fired. She used her last pay stub and lied about still working there. The magnitude of Sarah's mistake hit me like a physical blow. Payday loans were financial death traps in the best circumstances. Taking one out with no job and no way to pay it back was essentially signing up for years of debt hell. Dad, those places charge like 400% interest. If she can't pay it back in 2 weeks, she'll owe $3,000 by the end of the month. I know. He stood up, throwing a $5 bill on the table for his untouched coffee. She's at the house now, hysterical. Your mother's trying to calm her down. He paused at the edge of the booth, looking down at me with an expression caught between desperation and anger. Still think this is just about teaching lessons? The implication was clear, this was my fault. If I just helped with the car repair, none of this would have happened. Sarah would still have her job, still have her apartment, and wouldn't be trapped in a predatory lending nightmare. But I also knew that in 6 months, there would have been another emergency. And another after that. Now there were 3. I sat in that Denny's booth for another 20 minutes after Dad left, staring at his untouched coffee and trying to process what had just happened. Sarah's payday loan wasn't just a mistake, it was a financial time bomb that would destroy her credit for years. And according to my family, it was my fault for not preventing it. My phone buzzed with a call from Jake, my coworker. I almost didn't answer. Hey, you okay? You never came back from lunch and it's almost 4. I looked at my watch, surprised. I'd completely lost track of time. Sorry, family emergency. Can you tell Morrison I had to leave early? Sure, but dude, you've been acting weird all week. Everything alright? How could I explain that I was watching my entire family implode because I'd finally stopped funding their disasters? That my sister had just signed herself up for years of financial hell because I wouldn't transfer $800. It's complicated. Want to grab a beer after work? Sometimes talking helps. The offer was tempting, but I couldn't shake the image of Sarah sitting in my parents' living room, hysterical about a loan that would spiral into thousands of dollars of debt. A loan she took because I said no. Rain check. I drove home in a daze, but instead of going upstairs to my apartment, I sat in my car and opened my banking app. My savings account balance stared back at me, $23,847. Enough to solve everyone's immediate problems. Sarah's payday loan, the back mortgage payments, her car repair, even her rent to prevent eviction. All I had to do was transfer the money and this nightmare would end. My finger hovered over the screen. One tap and my family would be stable again. Sarah would get her job back, maybe. My parents would avoid foreclosure. The payday loan sharks would disappear. But then what? 6 months from now, would we be right back here? Would Sarah have another emergency, my parents fall behind on the mortgage again, someone else need rescuing? The real question was whether I was helping or enabling. My phone rang. Unknown number again. Hello. It's Sarah. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying for hours. I need to tell you something. I'm listening. The payday loan, it's worse than Dad said. I didn't just take $1,500. I went to 3 different places. A shaky breath. It's $4,000 total. My vision actually blurred. $4,000 in payday loans meant she'd owe close to $10,000 within a month. Even if she found a job immediately, she'd never be able to pay it back. The interest would compound until she was completely buried. Sarah, what were you thinking? I was thinking my brother abandoned me and I was desperate. Her voice cracked. I was thinking I had no other choice because the one person who always helped me decided I wasn't worth it anymore. The guilt hit me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just about boundaries anymore, my sister had destroyed her financial future in a panic. The car was just the beginning, she continued. Without the job, I can't make rent. Without a place to live, I can't get another job. It was all falling apart so fast, and those loan places made it sound so easy. Quick cash, pay back when you can. They didn't explain that, when you can, would never come. I closed my eyes, seeing the next few years of Sarah's life play out like a horror movie. Collection calls, wage garnishments, ruined credit, years of poverty because of one desperate week. There's something else, she whispered. Mom and Dad, they're talking about taking out a loan against the house. To help me with the payday loans and catch up on their mortgage. My heart stopped. They were going to risk their home to fix Sarah's mistake, a mistake that happened because I wouldn't fix her original problem. Sarah, you can't let them do that. Then help me. Please. I'm drowning here. The weight of the decision was crushing. Save my family and reset the cycle, or watch them destroy themselves trying to survive without me. Either way, someone was going to pay a price I wasn't sure any of us could afford. I hung up on Sarah and immediately called my parents' house. Mom picked up on the first ring. Oh, thank God, you're calling. Sarah told you about the loans. Mom, do not take out a loan against the house. Promise me. We don't have a choice. She owes $4,000 that becomes $10,000 in 3 weeks. These people aren't going to just forget about it. And if you default on a home equity loan, you lose the house entirely. We're going to lose it anyway. Her voice was getting shrill. The foreclosure notice came yesterday. We have 60 days before they auction it off. My hands started shaking. 60 days. I'd been helping with mortgage payments for 8 months, thinking I was preventing exactly this scenario. Apparently, I'd just been slowing down the inevitable. How much do you owe total? $12,000 to catch up completely. But that's not the point right now. Sarah is in real danger. These payday loan people, your father looked them up online. They send debt collectors. Aggressive ones. I thought about Sarah's panicked voice, the way she'd said she was drowning. $4,000 in payday loans was bad enough, but the kind of companies that preyed on desperate people didn't stop at phone calls and letters. I need to think about this. There's no time to think. Sarah made appointments with 3 more loan places tomorrow. She's planning to borrow more money to pay back the first loans. My stomach dropped. That's not borrowing, that's financial suicide. Then stop her. You're the only one with enough money to make this go away. After hanging up, I did something I'd never done before. I googled payday loan horror stories. What I found made me physically sick. People trapped in cycles of debt that lasted years. Families destroyed by interest rates that compounded daily. Women who'd borrowed $300 for groceries and ended up owing $8,000. Sarah was about to become one of those stories, and tomorrow she was going to make it exponentially worse. My doorbell rang at 9 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw a man I didn't recognize, middle-aged, cheap suit, clipboard in hand. My blood went cold. Can I help you? Looking for Sarah Martinez. We understand she lives here sometimes. The debt collectors had found my address. They were already hunting her down, and she'd only taken the loans this morning. She doesn't live here. Sure about that? We have records showing she's used this address for credit applications. Sarah had been using my address as a backup on financial documents. These people thought she lived with me, which meant they'd keep coming back until they found her. You've got the wrong place. We'll be in touch, the man said, making a note on his clipboard. These debts don't disappear, you know. They just get bigger. After he left, I called Sarah immediately. Have you been using my address on loan applications? Just as a reference. I didn't think. They came to my apartment, Sarah. Debt collectors. They're looking for you. Silence on the other end. They work fast, she finally whispered. God, what have I done? Cancel the appointments tomorrow. Do not take out more loans. Then what am I supposed to do? They want payment in 2 weeks or the amount doubles. I stared at my banking app, still open on my phone. The numbers hadn't changed, $23,847 in savings versus my family's combined debt of roughly $20,000. I could solve this entire crisis with one transfer and still have money left over. But solving it meant accepting that this was my responsibility now. Forever. The debt collector's words echoed in my head, these debts don't disappear. They just get bigger. He wasn't just talking about Sarah's payday loans. He was talking about my family. I stared at my phone screen until the numbers blurred together. 23,000 in savings. 20,000 in family debt. The math was simple, but the implications felt impossible to calculate. My phone buzzed with another unknown number. This is Marcus from Southwest Financial Services. I'm calling about Sarah Martinez. Our records show this number as an emergency contact. She's not. Sir, I don't need to speak with Miss Martinez right now. I need to speak with someone who cares about her well-being. The amount she owes is currently $3,800. Tomorrow it becomes $4,200. Next week, it's over $6,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. In one phone call, her debt had somehow grown by $800. That's impossible. She borrowed the money this morning. Processing fees, sir. Plus interest calculated from the moment she signed. It's all in the contract she agreed to. His voice was smooth, practiced. Now, we understand Miss Martinez may have experienced some employment difficulties. We're willing to work with family members who want to help resolve this situation quickly. The threat was barely veiled. Pay up or watch Sarah drown. I need to think about it. Of course. But sir, thinking costs money. Every day you think, that number gets bigger. After I hung up, I sat in my dark apartment and tried to remember when my family had become a financial emergency that never ended. Sarah's payday loans were just the latest crisis in a 3-year parade of disasters that always somehow became my responsibility to fix. My laptop chimed with an email notification. Dad, from his rarely used Gmail account again. Son, we need to talk about realistic solutions. I've been researching bankruptcy options for Sarah. Chapter 7 might eliminate the payday loans, but it would destroy her credit for 7 years. She's 24. That's her entire 20s and early 30s with no ability to get an apartment, a car loan, or even a credit card. I kept reading, my stomach sinking with each line. Your mother found a debt consolidation company that says they can negotiate the loans down to maybe 60% of what she owes. But they want $1,500 up front for their services. It feels like throwing good money after bad, but what choice do we have? The email continued with a detailed breakdown of Sarah's financial situation that made my spreadsheet look optimistic. Car repair, $800. Rent to avoid eviction, $1,200. Payday loans that were growing by the hour, approaching $4,000. Now a debt consolidation fee, $1,500. I know we haven't always appreciated what you've done for us. Your mother and I talked tonight, really talked, about how much you've helped over the years. We had no idea you were making personal sacrifices. We thought you were just, comfortable. The word, comfortable, stung. I'd been so busy making sure they never felt the stress of their financial problems that I'd successfully hidden my own. But son, this is different. This isn't Sarah being careless with textbook money or buying things she can't afford. This is survival. And if we don't act fast, she's going to be in a hole so deep that none of us can dig her out. The email ended with a sentence that made my hands shake. The debt consolidation company needs an answer by tomorrow morning. After that, Sarah's on her own. I closed my laptop and called Jake. Hey man, you sound terrible. What's going on? Hypothetically, if someone you cared about made a really stupid financial decision that was going to ruin their life, and you had the money to fix it, what would you do? How stupid are we talking? Payday loans while unemployed stupid. Jake whistled low. Shit. That's not stupid, that's financial suicide. A pause. But you said hypothetically. This isn't hypothetical, is it? My sister owes $4,000 that's growing every day. My parents are facing foreclosure. And somehow I'm the bad guy for not immediately fixing everything. Dude, you can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. But what if they actually freeze to death without me? The question hung in the air between us. Because that was the real issue, this wasn't about money anymore. It was about watching people I loved destroy themselves while I had the power to stop it. And choosing not to use it felt like choosing to let them fall. Jake's words echoed in my head for hours after we hung up. You can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. But as I lay awake at 3 a.m., all I could think about was watching my family burn while I stood there with a fire extinguisher, refusing to use it. My phone lit up with another text from an unknown number. This is your mother. Sarah's phone got shut off for non-payment. She's having panic attacks. We're taking her to urgent care but can't afford the copay. Please call. I stared at the message until my eyes burned. Even their emergency communications were becoming financial emergencies. But I didn't call. Instead, I got dressed and drove to the 24-hour diner downtown, the one where insomniacs and night shift workers gathered over burnt coffee and regret. I needed to think somewhere that wasn't my apartment, wasn't surrounded by reminders of the modest life I'd built while funding everyone else's chaos. The waitress, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, refilled my cup for the 3rd time. Rough night? Family stuff. She nodded knowingly. Money or marriage? Money. The worst kind. She leaned against the counter. I've got 6 kids and 12 grandkids, and every single one of them thinks I'm an ATM with feelings. You either learn to say no or you end up living in your car. Her bluntness was startling. Did you learn to say no? Eventually. After my oldest daughter nearly got me evicted borrowing against my rent money for her boyfriend's business opportunity. She made air quotes with her fingers. Turned out the business was selling drugs. Who knew? How do you live with watching them struggle? Sugar, they were struggling anyway. The difference is now it's their struggle instead of mine. I drove home as the sun was coming up, her words rattling around in my head. But when I pulled into my parking lot, I saw Dad's truck waiting by the entrance. He was slumped over the steering wheel, and for one terrifying moment I thought something had happened to him. He lifted his head as I approached. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hair disheveled. How long have you been here? Couple hours. Couldn't sleep anyway. He got out of the truck slowly, like an old man, though he was only 53. We need to talk. Dad, it's 6 in the morning. Sarah's in the hospital. My blood turned to ice. What happened? Panic attack turned into something worse. Her heart rate spiked, she couldn't breathe, started talking about how everything was hopeless. He rubbed his face with both hands. They're keeping her for observation. 72-hour hold. The words hit me like a physical blow. 72-hour psychiatric hold meant they were worried about her mental state, worried she might hurt herself. The debt collectors called the house at midnight, Dad continued. Then again at 2 a.m. Different companies, all demanding immediate payment. They told Sarah they had her work address, her friends' addresses, even threatened to contact her former boss about the outstanding debt. My stomach churned. Debt collectors weren't supposed to call in the middle of the night, weren't supposed to contact employers, weren't supposed to harass people like that. But payday loan companies often use tactics that skirted the edge of legality. Is she okay? She's scared out of her mind. Keeps saying she's destroyed everyone's life, that she should have never been born. Dad's voice cracked. The doctor wants to keep her longer, but we can't afford the extended stay. Insurance doesn't cover mental health the same way. Even Sarah's breakdown was becoming a financial crisis. There's more, Dad said quietly. Your mother collapsed this morning. Stress-induced chest pains. She's at a different hospital across town. They're running tests to rule out a heart attack. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Mom in the hospital, Sarah on psychiatric hold, Dad falling apart in a parking lot at dawn. The debt collectors weren't just coming for Sarah anymore, they were destroying my entire family. And I was the only one with the power to make it stop. Dad, go home. Get some sleep. I'll figure this out. He looked at me with desperate hope. You'll help. I couldn't say yes, but I couldn't say no either. Not with Mom in a cardiac unit and Sarah on suicide watch. I'll figure this out, I repeated. But as Dad drove away, I realized I had no idea what that actually meant anymore. I stood in my empty apartment, watching Dad's truck disappear around the corner, and made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of opening my banking app, I called my company's HR department. Hi, this is regarding our employee assistance program. I need to speak with someone about family crisis resources. 20 minutes later, I was armed with information I'd never thought to seek before: debt counseling services, emergency financial mediation, even legal aid for people trapped in predatory lending situations. Resources that existed specifically for situations like Sarah's, resources that didn't require me to empty my savings account. My phone rang before I could start making calls. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. This is Janet from Credit Solutions Plus. I understand you're the brother helping Sarah Martinez with her current financial difficulties. How did you get this number? Mr. Martinez, we specialize in resolving exactly these kinds of situations. Your sister owes approximately $4,200 as of this morning, but we can negotiate that down to maybe $2,500 if someone can provide immediate payment. The reduction sounded significant until I did the math. They were offering to save me $1,700 in exchange for $2,500 of my money. It was still a massive transfer from my savings to Sarah's creditors. What happens if no one can provide immediate payment? Well, that would be unfortunate for everyone involved. The amounts continue to grow, collection efforts intensify, and eventually we'd have to pursue more aggressive recovery methods. Such as wage garnishment, asset seizure, legal action. Your sister signed contracts, Mr. Martinez. These debts are legally enforceable. After hanging up, I called the legal aid number HR had given me. The lawyer who answered sounded tired but knowledgeable. Payday loans in amounts over $3,000. Yeah, we see this a lot. The good news is that some of those contracts might not be legally enforceable. The bad news is that figuring out which ones requires going through each agreement line by line. How long does that take? Could be weeks. Maybe months if they fight back. And in the meantime, the harassment usually continues. Weeks or months of debt collectors calling my parents' house at midnight. Weeks or months of Sarah spiraling deeper into panic while Mom recovered from stress-induced chest pains. My other phone started ringing. Work cell. Jake's name on the screen. Dude, Morrison is looking for you. You missed the client meeting this morning. I checked my watch, 9:47 a.m. I'd completely forgotten about the Henderson Industries presentation, the one I'd been preparing for weeks. Shit. Can you cover for me? Already did. Told him you had a family emergency in the hospital, which seems to be actually true based on how you sound. My mom's in cardiac intensive care and my sister's on psychiatric hold. Jesus Christ. Why didn't you say something earlier? Morrison's not a monster, he'll understand. But as I hung up, I realized work was becoming another casualty of my family's crisis. I'd already missed meetings, left early, been distracted and unfocused. How long before my job performance started suffering enough to matter? My apartment buzzer rang. Through the intercom, I heard a woman's voice, building management. We need to discuss the multiple visitors asking about Sarah Martinez. I buzzed her up, my stomach sinking. The debt collectors weren't just calling, they were physically canvassing my building, bothering my neighbors, treating my home like Sarah's last known address. Mrs. Chen from the management company looked uncomfortable as I opened the door. Mr. Martinez, we've had several complaints from other tenants about men in cheap suits asking questions about a Sarah Martinez. They're claiming she owes money and lives in this building. She doesn't live here. I understand that, but these men are being persistent. They've been in the lobby 3 times today, questioning residents, asking about which apartment she might be using. She paused diplomatically. It's making people uncomfortable. The unspoken threat was clear: if the debt collectors kept harassing my neighbors, my lease would become a problem. I'll handle it. I hope so. Because if this continues, we'll have to consider whether this living situation is compatible with our community standards. After she left, I sat on my couch and stared at my phone. Every solution led to another problem. Pay the debt, and I'd be funding the next crisis 6 months from now. Don't pay it, and watch my family, and potentially my own stability, crumble under the pressure. The legal aid lawyer had mentioned something interesting though: some of the contracts might not be enforceable. Which meant there might be a third option I hadn't considered. Instead of saving Sarah from her mistakes, maybe I could help her fight back against the people trying to profit from them. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad: Mom's stable. Tests came back clear: stress, not heart attack. But Sarah's asking for you. Says she has something important to tell you about the loans. I grabbed my keys. It was time to hear exactly what Sarah had gotten herself into. And maybe, finally, find a solution that didn't require me to choose between my family's survival and my own. The psychiatric ward at General Hospital felt like a different planet. Sterile white walls, the constant hum of fluorescent lights, and the kind of institutional quiet that made every footstep sound like an intrusion. I found Sarah in a small room with a narrow window, wearing hospital scrubs and staring at her hands. "You came," she said without looking up. "Dad said you had something to tell me about the loans." She finally met my eyes, and what I saw there made my chest tighten. Not just fear or desperation anymore, but something that looked almost like relief. I lied about how much I borrowed. My blood went cold. "What do you mean? It's not $4,000. She took a shaky breath. "It's 7,000. From 6 different places." The number hit me like a physical blow. 7,000 in payday loans meant she'd owe close to 15,000 within a month. Even if I liquidated my entire savings account, I couldn't cover what this would become. "Sarah, that's financial. Suicide, I know. The counselor here has been very clear about that." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out there's a whole category of self-destructive behavior called financial self-harm. Who knew?" I sank into the plastic visitor chair, trying to process the magnitude of what she'd done. 6 different loan companies. They have databases, but they don't talk to each other immediately. I figured I could get cash from multiple places before they caught on. She picked at a loose thread on her hospital gown. "I was going to pay back the original $800 for your car repair, then use the rest to catch up on rent and buy time to find another job. But you lost the job before you could pay anything back. And then the processing fees kicked in. And the daily interest. And the late penalties when I missed the first payment deadline." Her voice was getting smaller with each word. By the time I realized what was happening, I owed more than I'd borrowed, and the amount was growing faster than I could calculate. A nurse knocked and entered with a clipboard. "Sarah. Dr. Williams wants to see you in 15 minutes for your evaluation." After she left, Sarah looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, complete defeat. "There's something else. The debt consolidation company Dad found. They want $1,500 up front, but their service is just negotiating payment plans that stretch everything over 2 years at 30% interest. The math teacher in me finally kicked in yesterday. I'd end up paying more through their program than if I just let the loans compound." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I destroyed my life for nothing. And I dragged all of you down with me." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. "Mom's in a cardiac unit because of me. You're dealing with debt collectors because I used your address. Dad's talking about mortgaging the house they're already losing." I watched my sister's reflection in the window and realized something that changed everything. She wasn't asking me to fix this anymore. The desperate pleading from earlier in the week was gone, replaced by hollow acceptance. "The social worker here knows about predatory lending cases," Sarah continued quietly. "She says bankruptcy might be my only real option. 7 years of destroyed credit, but at least the harassment stops. What about Mom and Dad's foreclosure? That's separate from my mess. They'll have to figure it out themselves." She turned back to face me. "I'm done asking you to save us." The words should have felt like relief, but instead they terrified me. Because Sarah giving up meant she'd truly lost hope. And people without hope made decisions that couldn't be undone. My phone started ringing before I'd even left the hospital parking lot. Unknown number, but by now I recognized the pattern. "Mr. Martinez, this is David from Rapid Cash Solutions. We have a problem. Let me guess, my sister owes you money. Your sister committed fraud, Mr. Martinez. She provided false employment information on her loan application. That changes this from a civil debt collection matter to potential criminal fraud." The words made my vision blur. Criminal fraud meant police involvement, court dates, possibly jail time. Sarah wasn't just financially ruined anymore, she was looking at actual legal consequences. What kind of criminal charges? That depends on how cooperative she chooses to be. And how quickly this debt gets resolved. The threat was barely veiled. "We've already filed a report with the county prosecutor's office. But these things can sometimes be reconsidered if the debt is satisfied immediately." I hung up and immediately called the legal aid lawyer. "Fraud charges over payday loans." She sounded surprised. "That's unusual but not impossible. If your sister lied about employment status, they could argue criminal intent. But honestly, most prosecutors won't pursue these cases unless the amounts are significant. $7,000. That might be significant enough. Especially if they can prove she hit multiple lenders in one day with false information." After hanging up, I sat in my car outside the hospital and tried to calculate how much deeper this hole had just gotten. Criminal charges meant Sarah would need a lawyer she couldn't afford. Court costs, fines, possible restitution orders that would follow her for years even after bankruptcy. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Debt collector came to the house. Pounded on door for 10 minutes. Neighbor called police. This is getting scary. Another text, this one from Jake. Morrison wants to see you first thing Monday morning. Didn't sound happy. Everything okay? Then another unknown number, Mr. Martinez, this is Valley Finance Group. Your sister listed you as a reference on her loan application. We're prepared to hold you partially responsible for this debt under our cosigner clause. My hand started shaking. Cosigner clause? I'd never signed anything, never agreed to be responsible for Sarah's debts. But these companies operated in legal gray areas, using intimidation tactics that skirted the edge of what was allowed. I called the legal aid lawyer back. They can't hold you responsible for debts you didn't co-sign, she confirmed. But they can make your life miserable pretending they can. Harassment calls, threats, even fake legal documents that look official. How do I make it stop? Pay the debt, prove it's not your responsibility through expensive legal action, or wait for them to move on to easier targets. How long does waiting take? Could be months. Could be years. Depends how determined they are. I drove home through traffic that felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart from a distance. When I pulled into my parking lot, I saw 2 men in cheap suits standing by the building entrance, clipboards in hand. They approached my car as I parked. "Mr. Martinez. We're here about Sarah Martinez's outstanding debts." We understand you've been helping her with previous financial obligations. The phrasing was careful, calculated. They'd done research, knew about my history of helping family members. I don't know what you're talking about. Sir, we have records showing multiple financial transactions from your accounts to hers over the past 3 years. That establishes a pattern of financial responsibility. My blood ran cold. They'd somehow accessed information about my previous transfers to Sarah. Bank records, Venmo transactions, maybe even the mortgage payments I've been making to my parents. That doesn't make me responsible for her current debts. Maybe not legally, the second man said with a thin smile. But morally? That's between you and your conscience. They handed me a folder full of official-looking documents before walking away. Inside were payment schedules, settlement offers, and something that looked like a court summons but had no actual court information on it. Fake legal papers designed to scare me into paying. I went upstairs and called Jake. Dude, you sound like you're having a breakdown. Debt collectors are stalking me at home. My sister might face criminal charges. My mom's in the hospital from stress. And my boss wants to see me Monday morning, which probably means my job is in jeopardy too. Jesus. How much money are we talking about? 7,000 that becomes 15,000 in a few weeks. Jake was quiet for a long moment. You know what's crazy? You could probably negotiate them down to half that if you played hardball. These companies buy debts for pennies on the dollar. They'd rather get something than nothing. You think I should pay it? I think you should consider what happens to your life if this keeps escalating. Job performance, housing stability, mental health, there's a cost to fighting this that might be higher than just making it go away. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and did something I'd been avoiding. I googled Sarah Martinez fraud charges. Nothing yet, but that didn't mean much. These things took time to work through the system. My doorbell rang again. This time it was Mrs. Chen from building management, and she looked genuinely concerned. Mr. Martinez, I'm sorry, but we've received multiple noise complaints about people pounding on doors looking for Sarah Martinez. And now there are men in the parking lot approaching residents as they come home. She paused. I'm going to have to ask you to resolve this situation within the week, or we'll need to discuss terminating your lease. I was about to lose my apartment over debts I didn't owe, taken by a sister who'd lied about the amounts, to pay for problems that started with an $800 car repair I could have easily covered 3 weeks ago. The irony would have been funny if it weren't destroying my life. I sat on my couch surrounded by fake legal documents and felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete powerlessness. Every decision led to disaster. Pay the debt and enable the next crisis. Don't pay it and watch my family, and now my own life, collapse under predatory tactics. My phone rang. Work number. Hey, it's Morrison. I know it's Saturday, but we need to talk before Monday. Can you come in for an hour? My stomach dropped. Saturday emergency meetings were never good news. Is everything okay? Just need to discuss some client concerns about the Henderson presentation. Nothing that can't be fixed, but we should address it quickly. After hanging up, I realized the debt collector harassment wasn't just affecting my family anymore. If my work performance was suffering enough for weekend damage control, my career was becoming another casualty of Sarah's payday loan disaster. I drove to the office in a daze, practicing explanations that sounded professional instead of desperate. But when I walked into Morrison's office, he wasn't alone. Janet from HR sat across from his desk with a folder that made my blood run cold. Sit down, Morrison said gently. We've had some unusual contact from people claiming you're involved in financial fraud. The room started spinning. What kind of contact? Janet opened her folder. 3 different debt collection agencies called our main number yesterday, asking about your employment status and salary information. They claimed you were a cosigner on loans that are in default. I never co-signed anything. We know that, Morrison said quickly. But they were very persistent. Said they had documentation proving you were financially responsible for someone named Sarah Martinez. Janet leaned forward. They also mentioned they might need to garnish your wages for outstanding debts. Which prompted us to do some research. She slid a printed email across the desk. Subject line, Employee Background Verification, Urgent. This came from something called Legal Recovery Associates this morning. They're requesting confirmation of your employment for what they call debt enforcement proceedings. I stared at the email, watching my professional life implode in real time. These weren't just harassment calls anymore, they were actively trying to destroy my job. There's more, Morrison said quietly. Henderson Industries called yesterday. Apparently, someone contacted them claiming you were involved in fraudulent financial activities and that they should reconsider doing business with our firm. My vision actually blurred. They weren't just coming after my income, they were attacking my clients, trying to damage my professional reputation so thoroughly that paying their fake debt would seem like the cheaper option. This is all connected to your sister's situation? Janet asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Okay, here's what we're going to do, Morrison said. HR is documenting everything for legal purposes. We're not taking any of this seriously, but we need you to resolve it quickly. Our clients can't be getting calls about our employees' alleged financial crimes. After leaving the office, I sat in my car and tried to process how completely they'd weaponized my life. Family in crisis, apartment threatened, job under attack, criminal charges pending, all over $7,000 that had started as an $800 car repair. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This could all stop today. Call us. We're reasonable people. But the most terrifying part wasn't the harassment or the threats or even the fake legal documents. The most terrifying part was that paying them was starting to feel like the rational choice. And once I gave into that logic, I'd never be free of it again. I made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of calling the debt collectors back, I drove straight to the police station. The officer at the front desk looked skeptical as I explained the situation. So you want to file a harassment complaint against how many companies? 6 that I know of. Maybe more. I spread out all the fake legal documents on his desk. They're calling my work, threatening my neighbors, using intimidation tactics that I'm pretty sure are illegal. Officer Martinez, no relation, thankfully, flipped through the papers with a practiced eye. Yeah, most of this is garbage designed to scare you. This one here. He held up what looked like a court summons. Completely fake. Real court documents don't use Comic Sans font. So what can you do about it? File a report, document everything, send them cease and desist letters. But honestly, these companies operate out of different states specifically to avoid local law enforcement. Your best bet is filing complaints with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and your state attorney general. He handed me a stack of forms that would take hours to complete. Fair warning though, this process takes months, and in the meantime, the harassment usually gets worse before it gets better. As I drove home, my phone rang with yet another unknown number. This time I answered. Mr. Martinez, this is Carol from First National Recovery. I understand you've been to the police today. My blood went cold. How do you know that? We have resources that help us stay informed about our clients' activities. Now, involving law enforcement unnecessarily tends to complicate situations that could be resolved simply. The implied threat was crystal clear, they were monitoring my movements somehow, and fighting back would only make things worse. What do you want? We want to help you. $7,000 is a manageable amount for someone with your income level. We can structure a payment plan that works for everyone. I don't owe $7,000. My sister does. Your sister is currently hospitalized with no income and no assets. You're her closest relative with the financial means to resolve this situation. From our perspective, that makes you the logical solution. After hanging up, I realized they weren't just using intimidation anymore, they were using basic family psychology. They knew I wouldn't let Sarah face criminal charges, wouldn't watch my parents lose their house, wouldn't allow debt collectors to destroy everyone's lives over money I could technically afford to pay. They were betting on my love for my family being stronger than my sense of financial self-preservation. And they were probably right. My apartment buzzer rang again. This time it wasn't debt collectors, it was my Uncle Mike, holding a six-pack of beer and wearing an expression I'd never seen before. We need to talk, he said, pushing past me into the apartment. And don't tell me you're too busy. I drove 3 hours to get here. Mike had never visited my apartment before. Hell, we barely talked except at family gatherings. But he walked straight to my kitchen, opened 2 beers, and set one in front of me like we did this every weekend. Your dad called me. Told me everything that's been happening. He took a long drink. Sarah's loans, your mom in the hospital, the foreclosure, all of it. Let me guess, you're here to convince me to pay Sarah's debts. Actually, I'm here to tell you about the time I almost made the same mistake you're about to make. He leaned against my counter. 20 years ago, my brother Tommy got into gambling trouble. Owed some very serious people a lot of money. They were making threats, calling the house, following his kids to school. I'd never heard this story before. I liquidated my retirement account to pay them off. $43,000, gone overnight. You know what Tommy did 6 months later? I was afraid to ask. Got right back into gambling. Owed even more money within a year, except this time I had nothing left to help him with. The parallel was so obvious it hurt. Sometimes, Mike said quietly, the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of their own choices. Mike's words hung in the air between us like a challenge I wasn't ready to face. But before I could respond, my phone started ringing. Dad's number. Don't answer it, Mike said firmly. Let me tell you how this ends first. I silenced the call. Tommy lost his house, his family, almost everything. But you know what? He also finally got help. Real help. Went to Gamblers Anonymous, got therapy, learned to manage money properly. Today, 20 years later, he's financially stable for the first time in his adult life. But what if Sarah doesn't bounce back like Tommy did? Then that's Sarah's choice to make. Not yours. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad, good news. Found a lawyer who specializes in payday loan cases. Says most of Sarah's contracts are illegal under state law. Wants to meet Monday. I showed Mike the message. He read it and smiled grimly. See? The solution was never your money. It was finding people who actually know how to fight these predators. Over the next hour, Mike helped me do something I should have done weeks ago, research actual resources instead of just reaching for my wallet. We found 3 different legal aid organizations that specialized in predatory lending cases. A nonprofit that provided free financial counseling for people trapped in payday loan cycles. Even a state program that helped families facing foreclosure navigate mortgage modification processes. Your family doesn't need a ATM, Mike said as we printed out contact information. They need education, legal help, and professional guidance. Things that actually solve problems instead of just postponing them. Monday morning brought the meeting with Morrison I'd been dreading, but armed with Mike's perspective, I handled it differently than I would have a week earlier. The debt collection calls have stopped, I told him confidently. I filed complaints with the appropriate authorities and documented everything for our legal team. My sister is working with a specialist lawyer who handles these exact situations professionally. Morrison looked relieved. So this is resolved. It's being resolved the right way, through proper legal channels instead of just throwing money at it. The lawyer Dad found turned out to be exactly what Sarah needed. Within 2 weeks, she'd gotten 4 of the 6 payday loans declared invalid due to illegal lending practices. The remaining 2 companies agreed to settle for 30 cents on the dollar when faced with actual legal representation instead of a panicking family member with a checkbook. Sarah paid the settlements using a structured plan that included financial counseling and budgeting classes. She moved back in with our parents temporarily, found a new job, and slowly rebuilt her life using skills instead of bailouts. My parents qualified for a mortgage modification program I helped them research, not by paying their bills, but by literally sitting with them and filling out paperwork properly. They kept their house. And me? I kept my $23,847 in savings. More importantly, I kept my boundaries. 6 months later, Sarah called to tell me she'd saved enough money to get her own apartment again. I'm proud of myself, she said, and for the first time in years, I was proud of her too. Thank you, she said quietly. For not saving me. You saved yourself. Yeah, but only because you finally let me. The calls for help didn't stop entirely. They never do with family. But now when someone has a financial emergency, my first response isn't, how much do you need? It's, what resources have you looked into? Turns out, the best thing I ever did for my family was refusing to be their solution. And the best thing I did for myself was learning that love doesn't have to cost everything.